Hey everybody, Joel, Moose Droppings by ImportSauce.com, and rotating assembly's done. That is the last video that is up, and now it is time to start putting everything back together. So stick around. We are going to start reassembling everything that bolts onto the block, work our way up back to the head, and hopefully within a few days have that complete engine on the stand, ready to get it over to the front of the car. We're going to walk you through bolt by bolt, every torque spec, every gasket, everything that we run into on this. So stick around and enjoy. Okay, so we have finished everything over here, and we have assembled most of what we need here. Obviously the turbo, alternator, starter, whole bunch of brackets, whole bunch of heat shields, all that kind of stuff. Intake pipes, tubes, all that sitting still down in the car, in the trunk. But we have everything that we need to start putting everything back onto here. So I went through and watched the teardown video that we did a couple months ago, and I just made a checklist of everything that I did and removed, and I'm just going to work backwards up from there with the help of Vita for the procedure, the torque specs, number of bolts, part numbers on the gaskets, which I can line up with all this stuff over here. Everything when it came off, it got bagged and tagged, so we're gonna have an easy time finding what we need. But yeah, we're gonna start and get going on this and walk you through step by step the buildup, just like we did step by step on the teardown. Mentioning torque specs, when any specific juices are needed for that, and show you what it takes to get this giant pile of parts and nuts and bolts and juices back into an engine. First thing we are going to do is we are going to track down 3 gaskets. 1, 2, 3. Probably over here in our pile of gaskets and O-rings. I think it's probably that one that has 3 exactly. And then we're going to put those in, and then we are going to get our oil pickup, which already has its brand new O-ring sitting on there, and we will get that down, get that bolted in, and that is 2 bolts that we have here, and the torque spec on that is 17 Newton meters. One tool that we are using is we just have a Newton meter to unitconverters.net to foot pound, just because everything in Vita is Newton meters. So again, we're going to drop 3 gasket O-rings in there, and then we are going to drop the oil pickup tube and torque the 2 bolts that go on there down to 17 newtons, or 12.5 pounds. All gaskets are in. Put a little bit of oil on them just so they're a little bit juiced up. 1, 2, 3. And our oil pickup with the 2 bolts, 10 millimeter head, 12.5 torque pounds. So the next thing we're going to do is get our anaerobic sealer, our Volvo gasket maker. And as you saw in the rotating assembly video, we are not going to use the little paintbrush that they recommend. We're just going to go ahead and bead this on around the whole outside, and then get ready after we clean up the oil pan. It's been sitting kind of in the closet collecting dust. Clean that up, and then we are going to drop it down on there. And then 29 bolts, M7, same thing, 17 Newton meters as it says. So we'll hit that again at 12.5 foot-pounds. Our Volvo anaerobic sealer, we have a fat bead all the way across, and then once we sandwich it, We have a old bed sheet that we're just cutting up, and we'll probably use that to wipe whatever juice is out the sides there. As mentioned, on Vita, 29 of these, 3 different sizes. The smaller ones go pretty much all the way around the outside. Over here on the bell housing transmission side, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are going to be the long guys. And then the medium 1, 2, 3 are going to go over here 1, 2, 3 on the crank pulley timing side. I did notice that these longer ones had some thread sealer on them, and it appears that they may go into a water jacket on there. It doesn't say anything in there about thread seal or anti-seize, anything on Vita, but because I can see that it was there, I am going to apply some new stuff on there. So that'll be the next step. We're going to go ahead and flip this, juice up those 7 bolts, and then we will drop the pan, which has already been cleaned off over there on top of this, and then start putting those all in and torquing them to 17 Newton meters, 12.5 foot-pounds. Oil pan is on. All of the bolts are torqued to spec. You can just quickly see real quick how a Volvo black bolt compared to some fresh black paint is not black at all. Luckily these are facing down under the engine. No one's going to see them, but we're going to go through and wipe off the excess there. One note is with the Elevate external oil cooler. We have video on that. It was harder to get to these bolts down here. I couldn't get a direct pass on the torque wrench. It was only 12.5 pounds, so I kind of felt about where the torque was with a wrench, and then with the torque, and then I did those 4 kind of by hand. 12.5 pounds is not much, and the gasket is gooping out, so I think we're going to be solid there. But we will go ahead and wipe all this down and then move on to the next step. Next up is the oil pump. So we got the oil pump from Volvo. It came with this seal, and it came with that O-ring around the outside. But we also bought, I believe it came with this gasket as well. And we were unsure if it was going to come with those two, so we bought oil pump seal kit. These are extra, but it's better to have a couple bucks worth of extra than not what we need. So the gasket goes on a very specific way. We're still upside down now, but it only goes one way. And I'll show you. There we go, right? And the bolt holes are in specific positions, so they will line up either way, but it's only one top and one bottom. So if you have it backwards, you may have an opening on this side. So just make sure that your 4 bolt holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, a return hole is exposed, and then your 2 openings there. So we have to pull this 30 millimeter off to slide that on. And then the oil pump only goes one way, same way, because the bolts are not 100% symmetrical. And once we put it on, we will have 4 M6 Torx that go on there, and Vita is telling us 10 Newton meters there. We should probably get a smaller torque wrench because ours barely went down to 12. So we're going to torque it down as low as it goes, and you know, it may just be hand tight because 10 Newton meters are, I think that was 7 pounds. Yeah, 7.37 pounds. So we're going to go ahead and pull out our torque bits and go ahead and suit that guy on. Doesn't say anything about sealing or juices or liquids, and that's probably because there's a gasket on there, and probably because there's a nice thick O-ring on there as well. Important note, if you are finding that your oil pump is not seating, it is because there are specific notches and grooves on here. So in order to make it sit, you may have to either turn the crank or find that position where it will go in. Oh, there we go. And there was a special Volvo tool to pull this off. So there may, in fact, be the same one. Well, when you put it back on, theoretically, if you maybe like a 4-lug, it should pull it in equally. But you're going to want to make sure that as you get closer, that the orientation is shown. And I'll show you it's upside down. It'll only notch in one way, but it's going to be something like this, where this is actually the timing mark for your top dead center on your crank is pointing at 12 o'clock. We're upside down with the engine, but pointing up. So maybe I'll flip it over and tighten it since we are pretty much done on the bottom. Well, I'm glad that we actually had an extra one, because as we were putting that one on, there was a little too much pressure as we were pushing, and the guy was coming through. So when I put it on and use this new one, we can see that the internal kind of little springy guy that holds the flap here in the back has blown out. So when I put it on this time, I'm going to make sure to go around with just dab a small amount of oil, and then a super thin like plastic straight edge, and push around that lip and make sure that it seats properly. And that way, when it's pushing inward, that the crank pulley pin over there is not kind of pushing this up and backwards, which is what caused that. So be aware of that. Okay, so what we found is this thing was just kept popping off, right? So we went ahead and put the oil pump on, we did the torque, and then we're gonna kind of oil this up and then seat this thing in. After applying it, it should be a little bit easier to get it on and maneuver it without it keep having to pop out, and little spring keeps popping out. So I'm guessing the original is still probably okay. I thought that that was connected somehow, but it just kind of sits in there. So we're going to put some oil and work it in that way. I think that's going to be a little bit better. So next we'll jump over to the cooling system. This is going to be the water pump, the thermostat, and another thing or two. So on Vita, easily enough, it just says, hey, this one instruction may also include the instruction to install it. So pretty much it just says, hey, there are 7, X7, M7 bolts, and these are brand new. And if you are reusing yours, make sure that you use some thread sealant, because these go into water jacket holes. But essentially we're just gonna boot this thing up, and torque spec is 17 Newton meters, which again is 12 foot-pounds of torque. So we're gonna put the gasket on. It doesn't say anything about sealant or juice or anything, so we're just gonna put that on, torque it down, and call that. In line with the cooling system, let's go ahead and put the thermostat housing on there. Again, we had purchased a thermostat, not knowing that this one came loaded with one already, so we got a backup. Check to make sure that your rubber gasket is on there. That's going to be important. There are 3 M7s and 1 locking pin, which goes into here. So since we are not hooking hoses up now, we will just stick the lock pin on there for safekeeping. And anytime there's not a torque spec in Vita, there's a master torque spec list, which pretty much goes through most of the major stuff, but couldn't find the thermostat anywhere on here. And in those situations, there's just a master sheet here that says, hey, for the thread of the bolt, here is the torque spec. And they mention quite a bit through here that, hey, the tightening sequence, if it is not listed, is center outwards. So this is just 3, so that's not a big deal, but M7, and then we just have that in our thread guy, and we say, oh yeah, okay, this is an M7, so we know that that is going to be 17. So again, 12.5 pounds. We'll go ahead and mount that up on here, clean the surface, and do that. Next up, let's hit the oil filter housing, or the PCV system, right? So your oil filter, again, we bought an oil filter, and then when we opened this one up, we bought this from Volvo. It already had a Volvo oil filter installed. So there are 4 M7s, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then this is an M6, which holds your oil dipstick through this bracket here, which will be this extra one. We have our little hose guy, which will go here and connect onto over here, right? So that's gonna hook up here, seal here, and then our little hose guy is gonna come up. We may not put that on because that may, yeah, I think that reaches up to the underside of the head. Maybe on the bottom of something. So we'll kind of see where it sits and where it lands. Maybe we'll just stick it on there so that it's there, but I think it may have something to do with the lower intake manifold. So again, these are M7s, and on here, it does let us know 17 Newton meters, which is again is 12.5. And then the one that holds the oil dipstick is 10 Newton meters, which I think was like 7.3 or something like that. So again, before you put this on, you want to check, make sure that there is brand new seals. This one from Volvo came with those on there. So pretty much we're just going to put it on and torque it to spec. We'll show you what it looks like after. Okay, here is the PCV. 3 bolts on the bottom, 1 there on the top. Stuck that little hose on. The bigger side goes into the system. The smaller side, I think, goes up into lower inlet manifold. Oil dipstick tube is secured right there with that bracket. And I forgot to mention, but there's a brand new gasket O-ring on there. This thing is nice and solid. You can see how solid it is. When we pull the dipstick, the whole engine moves. So that's the PCV. Also comes with this new hose, this breather hose, which comes here up and goes, you can see the shape, it goes right dead center there. So until we get the head on, this will just sit over there, and the hose clamp that came off. We have new black ones, but we'll just keep that there so we know that it needs one. Back to the cooling system, and moving to the back of the block is going to be the coolant main hard pipe. So this lays flush against the back of the block there. This tube here goes into that little hole there where the water pump is. Pulled the old gasket out, or the O-ring. We have a brand new one that goes in there, so that's going to seat into that hole. You can see there's a little groove there, and then that will keep that nice and snug. And then the smaller but separate one, you can see 2 little notches there, kind of sits on there like that. It comes down, you have a different hose, right? You have 2 hoses, and these 2 go to your oil cooler. This is a bypass hose from Elevate for the external oil cooler, because it is not coolant cooled, it is now air cooled. So that bypass hose will hook up and move elsewhere. And we have a brand new gasket O-ring suited up on there as well. M7, and we've also jumped up to N8. I do see some thread sealer on there, so I want to make sure to apply some new stuff. The big M8 is for the small singular, and the M6, or I'm sorry, M7 is going to be that guy. The yellow tape that we have on the hoses is just to remind us that, hey, we need to put a hose clamp here, and so those are just reminders to do that. So we'll go ahead and bolt those 2 up. Torque spec on the M8 is 24 Newton meters, which is 17.7 foot-pounds of torque. Here's what that hard pipe looks like, right? So actually this is not for the smaller pipe. The smaller pipe is mounted under and goes down, boop, and ends right there. The other pipe comes down right there. This one slid all the way in, and that mounted up. And the rest of these are all set. So coolant hard pipe on the back, both of them are all set. Next up is the carrier bearing bracket. This is for the passenger side axle. It will mount up right here. 1, 2, 3. Total of 5 bolts. You have 2 that hold the top bracket on. So once you put the axle in, then you put those down. 3rd, and then 2 up top. So these 3, 1, 2, 3, M8 by, let me see what it was, M8 by 125. And then these top 2 here, and here, M10 by 1.5. So torque spec on those, a little bit bigger than what we're used to. The smaller ones, the M8s, are going to be 24 newtons, and the M8's 50. So let's take a look here. 24 newtons is 17.7, 18, and 50, 36.87, 36.89, 36.9. Let's call that almost 37. So let's double check. Yep, 18 and 37. So we'll go ahead and suit those up, show you what it looks like. And there's the carrier bracket. We actually didn't torque these down yet because we just did them hand tight because we're going to have to pull them off and put an axle in there. So but that is the positioning. There's not much left on here. We got one thread back there. I don't even remember what that is. One there. That is the turbo oil feed line that drops down through there. And nothing else that threads on the back there. So pretty dang close back there. Next thing we're going to suit up is this alternator bracket, as I called it. But the bracket also houses your 2 spring-loaded tensioners, pulleys, on there. Those are brand new, suited up. There are 8 bolts that go on here, and there are 3 sizes. They are all M8, which means our torque spec is going to be 12.5 foot-pounds. But down here on the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the longest bolts because they have to go all the way through and into the block. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Up top, there are 3 short bolts, which are the, here, 1, 2, 3. And then the medium-sized bolt is here because it's kind of hollow. You can see it's hollow and it has to reach back there and fill that gap. So 3 small, 1, 2, 3, the medium, and then the 4 of the larger. M8, we'll go ahead and torque that down and that'll be ready. Update on that. The 3 small bolts up top, yes. The 4 small bolts are largest bolts on the bottom. These ones will sink all the way in. These ones will leave a bit of a gap. I'm guessing that is because once the alternator's on, that is going to do something there. This medium-sized one, actually, that is not a hole. There's nothing threaded behind that, nothing threaded behind that. And these are just little guys. I think a line or something goes across that. So we're actually going to go grab the alternator, bolt that on, and see to make sure that those 3 bolts somehow have a place to live. Okay, as suspected, the alternator will make up for the gaps on those bolts. And number 3 is actually, that medium guy, is up top sideways, which will go through there. So we'll go ahead and put this on. Torque specs are the same because it's still the same M8 bolts. Next up, let's put the crank pulley on. In some cases, this is in 2 pieces. Maybe when you took it off, but this is back to a 1 piece. It is a 30 mil nut, pretty large. And the torque spec on this is the biggest one we've seen so far, 180 Newton meters, 132, almost 133 foot-pounds. So, you know, the crank is spinning freely and everything's firing. So what we're gonna do and what we did to get it off, we're gonna take 2 flywheel bolts. We are not going to, you know, thread them in all the way, but we are going to put 2 of those in, and then we're gonna get a pry bar and somehow you know, lock it against something here so that when we turn, it will stay locked in place so that we can get that torque spec on there. One important thing to note is the pulley only goes on one way. So if you look, you'll see all the splines, and you'll see right there under my thumb is one that is missing a spline or a skipped spline in there. And if you come over here to the splines here, you can see we've aligned that one top, right? So it'll only slide on one way. If you're having some issues, don't start banging, just make sure that your alignment is good. So we'll clean up the splines on here, clean up the splines on there, and then we'll go ahead and put that on. And we'll show you after how we were able to lock in for the torque. Okay, that's all torqued down. So what we did is we had a pry bar, which was resting under that plug, and then flywheel bolt, and as we moved it up, the handle here would hit here, and we were able to get to torque. We had to switch over torque wrenches to our big boy to get to 132. And as we were putting it in, I noticed there was a gap here, but as I started to tighten the nut, it pulled everything in, and then you could physically feel that the nut or that the pulley seated. I could feel that through the wrench. And then that's when I just started the torque procedure there. Okay, I think we made a mistake, right? So we put the harmonic balancer and timing pulley in, but this plastic cover came off after I had pulled those. And you can see it's a little tight. It's kind of sitting there. That's not supposed to be there. And what I'm thinking is there is a little lip along the back of that all the way down, and I'm almost thinking that it kind of sits in this groove all the way down so that that will go flush. And it's very difficult to kind of maneuver that on. So I'm gonna see if I can get that on without having to pull this back off. But when you're assembling, put that plastic cover on before you put the crank pulley harmonic balancer oscillation damper on. As I had suspected, that timing cover does sit and notch back in that groove there. It was a little tricky, but yeah, definitely put that on before you put this on. And another thing is, this is a clip-on piece that clips on kind of like this, right? Because your axle CV boot is right there, and that's to prevent, if it blows, all that grease and gunk from hitting the engine. You kind of have a notch, and we have to slide the bottom up behind, and then the top is going to click in, and then same thing with the bottom there. This would have been a lot easier when this was off, just to have it there and slide it in. I think we're still going to be able to get that. And then also this lower plastic cover, you can see on the side of the oil pump, 1, 2, 1, 2, line up with these two, 1, 2. And that's down here underneath the oil pump, just to keep gunk from getting up in there. Again, that would have been a lot easier with the oscillation damper off. And I did feed the timing belt in there because it was getting so tight with the guards and the rails. And that would have been difficult too. So in hindsight, if I had to do it again, I would put the plastic CV boot guard on that whole piece, and then I would slip the timing cover on. Shoot, I may even probably put this on first. Pretty much all of that stuff before the oscillation damper, crank, and timing and auxiliary pulley is what I would recommend that you do. But there were a couple M6s. There's one right there that holds the plastic. There's one right there. Out of the 5 that you pull off, this is like M7 or M8. The others are M6. So the big one goes there. And let's see, yeah, it's just those 2 for now. 1, 2. And there's 2 more, which will be the oil pump, 2 that hold that bottom piece. And then when we're all done putting all the other stuff in there, there's one bolt left. This clips like that. And you can see there's that one bolt, which will go right there. And that is going to, I think, somehow maybe attached to this bracket, or maybe there's going to be something there that it attaches to. So we still have one more bolt hanging out. Next up, let's get these two tensioner for the, that might be for the timing belt, and also the pulley. So this guy is 2 bolts, and he goes boop like that. Think of it like flat across the top. You'll see. They only line up 2 ways, and there are 2 bolts there. Those are M8, so 17.7 foot-pounds of torque. And then this actually requires some setting. There's only 1 bolt on there, but when you tension it and do a thing, there's a special setting. But essentially there's the bolt, and then that little knob there is the guide for that, right? So that is going to go in, and then we're just going to kind of set it there for now, and we'll go through the procedure on this when we are working with the actual belts in here, timing belt, auxiliary belt, things of that nature. So we will go ahead and put those 2 on, and again, we're not going to torque this one. It does have sealant because it does go into I guess a water jacket in there. And we'll come back to that and torque it when we need to, just so that it's not finally set. Next thing we're going to talk about is sensors. So, oil pressure and coolant temp. I should have done the coolant temp when we did the reservoir. Came with another clip. This is the one that came with the reservoir. This is the one that came with the coolant temp. I think they'll both serve the same functions, but essentially, this little guy just goes on the reservoir. It already has its little O-ring in there. And that is, well, after we push it in, notice right there where the brass ends, that little groove is where that retainer ring is going to slide through those little grooves there. So let me see if we can get that in. Okay, that's seated, and pick up, I like this one, it's a little bit thicker, but essentially kind of do that, and once it's in, the 2 sides are going to kind of pinch that together. So just give it a, ooh, see, that is a good one. It's got a lot of tension on it. Okay, well, let me put the phone down real quick. You can look at this piston. Okay. So we got that on, but we see how it's kind of not engaged, which means this can probably go down. There we go. And you heard that snap. And I saw this side is seated. This side, if we look close, a little off. Let's see if we can kind of just press that down. Yep. And maybe this side needs to come up a little. Oh, there we go. Push that in. Okay, so if we look close, we can see, yeah, it's in the brass. Kind of finagle it, make sure. And then come back and give it a tug. Yeah, that thing is locked in. Next thing we want to talk about is the factory oil pressure sensor, right? Little single plug there, and that goes, one of the last things we have here, right next to the PCV system, right? And then it just plugs in. But we have what we've been working on, our custom triple pod. Right now we have just a standard triple pod, but we're doing the molding on that. And for that, we do have a glow shift oil pressure sensor, because we want to see that in real time, not just a warning light if something goes wrong. The glow shift unit And for that, we had to get a tap. We got this from Glow Shift, where it has the factory threading there. And then you can add multiple. We're just going to use that one there. And initially looking at it, it looked like it was going to be pretty close. It's pretty tight in there. So we also ordered an extension. I think that it's going to fit without it. But the problem is right now it's kind of butting up against the oil dipstick tube. So I may come over here, loosen that, and kind of twist this out of the way while I tighten that, and then see if I can still get this up. If not, I may just put a small washer or spacer here to pull that out just a bit. This thing can swivel and turn, no problem. I may even end up bending this out just a little bit, just if we have some clearance issues there. So first I'm going to try it with just the Glow Shift tap. But again, that's going to mean that the Glow Shift gauge tap has to end up on this side, because obviously the new gauge or sensor can't be on this side because there's no room there. So we're going to finagle with that. If not, I mean, you would just take the regular sensor and screw that mamma jamma in. You will notice the Glow Shift one came with sealant on it. The factory one did not, but we are going to seal both of those up with sealant. And they all came with crush washers, so we're definitely going to make sure that we use those on there as well. So we'll play with that and let you know what we did. Okay. Now I remember why we bought that extension, and we tested the extension. It's not in the way of anything. The only thing that runs in front of it is the master coolant hose comes down from the thermostat, but there was plenty of room. It's because the input on this is so far in that you won't be able to tighten this thing or get it in, because it's right up against the block. So we are going to pull this out and we are going to run it with the extension. We'll show you what that looks like. And again, it doesn't impede anything in terms of space or anything running in front of it. Okay, so here's the final crush washer, thread sealer. In there on the extension, thread sealer, thread sealer, thread sealer. And as mentioned, we checked this before we pulled it out. We're like, hey, that's where that goes. And we screwed this whole assembly in just to make sure that the radiator hose has room. So see if we can get that dipstick back on and if that's gonna need some adjustments. Okay, so the problem is the oil dipstick tube, right? So if we look there, we're pretty close, but not close. It's hitting that. So we're just gonna bend the tube a little bit out this way and a little bit down. And as long as you have a nice kind of straight bendy action, no kinks, then the tube or the stick won't have any problem making it down. Took a little time, but we reshaped this guy. So he still sits flush down in here with this nice washer. Actually comes up and goes over, when before it went right there. And then we were able to use the same bracket. We just drilled a new hole. So paint took a little bit of a beating with the reshaping, but no problem. We have some extra VHT wrinkle, and we still have to paint the transmission. So no big deal now that we know this is fitted and works perfectly, and the bracket is back where it originally started. This is where it started, and we double checked there we go, everything on here, and the dipstick goes in and out, no problem. So you know, putting that external or secondary gauge pod for the oil temp sensor is not as straightforward as it's seen. You know, if you can track down one of these splitters where the thing is not so close to the block, where maybe it was on the other side, I'm sure you can find that, or just a single one that's a little bit longer. And you know, you'd probably be all right if the sensor was, you know, just about there. And then you wouldn't have a problem with that. I mean, theoretically, there is a hole, now that I think about it, right there on the bottom. I guess we could have had this, you know, just shooting down in hindsight. But I don't know, maybe for another time. Okay, so the last thing I did is I just stuck the two belts in here. There's the two belts. Alternator, one goes down to, and I'll put a diagram up on this as well and leave it up in the corner so you can screenshot it. The alternator belt goes from the alternator around this pulley back behind here and will attach to the AC compressor, which has two pulleys for two belts on there, right? And then the belt that comes off of the crank is just simply going to also go around this front pulley and attach here. So both of these are going to hit the power steering pump here. And aside from that, pretty much that is everything that we can put onto the block. We will start moving over here. We have angle gear bracket. That's only for you all-wheel drive folks, but we took that off before the engine came out. We could probably mount that up. It goes down in there, but we'll wait till we get to the angle gear. All the rest of this stuff is head stuff. This is head bracket. The engine hoist goes onto the head. The head bolts go in the head. VVT solenoids and such go on the head. And then everything else is transmission related. So essentially we're done. We'll move on to the head.
This T5 engine rebuild is brought to you in part by IPDUSA.com. IPD is Import Sauce's go-to for anything we need maintenance or repair on any of our Volvos. One reason we like them, the My Garage feature, where you can add all your Volvos and then quickly shop for particular parts for that vehicle. When you click on anything, it will give you an alert letting you know that this does fit. If there are fitment issues, you will get an alert when adding to cart, and this will let you know what exactly to check out before. This will ensure that you are getting exactly the right part for your Volvo. Second thing we love, kit builders. Here, for popular items, you can get the option to build a kit by adding on additional components that may be related. In many cases, you'll have options for genuine Volvo, or for a more budget-friendly shopping cart, you can add aftermarket. So, when you're going through, you can either select or not select certain components and make sure that you're getting exactly what you need. Lastly, customer service. Their customer service is great. They are US-based here on the West Coast. Anytime we call the phone number, a real live Volvo owner and daily driver answers the phone and works with you on any product questions or help with your shopping cart. If you're getting your parts anywhere else, go ahead and check out IPDUSA.com.